the Mount Rushmore book tag. I was tagged several months ago by David Wiley, but recently on the Wizardly Duo Discord server, the question came up about what is your fantasy Mount Rushmore? So who are the authors that you would put on your Mount Rushmore, meaning the 4 authors that you think are the greatest or something like that for whatever reason. And so that question brought this tag back to my mind that, oh yeah, I need to do this one. And so it's been a while since I've been tagged in it, but I still needed to get to it. So your Mount Rushmore book tag, I was tagged by David Wiley. Prompts are as follows. 1A, within a genre, which authors are on your all-time Mount Rushmore? So the genre that I chose for this is fantasy because I've read the most fantasy. Pretty standard answer there. So the authors that I put on my all-time Mount Rushmore are J.R.R. Tolkien, Ursula K. Le Guin, Brian Jacques, and Brandon Sanderson. So both Sanderson and Brian Jacques either of them could be replaced by C.S. Lewis, but I need to read more of his stuff before I can say for certain that, yeah, I want him to be on there. Either of them could be replaced pretty easily though, and I wouldn't feel bad about it. 1B, did you base your choices off your favorite authors you feel are giants, or most legendary or impactful, or some other criteria, and why? So it's kind of a mixture of several things. It's who I've read the most by, who I can see the influence of the most, who I've enjoyed the most. So I've only read 3 Le Guin books, but I can see her influence, and I really enjoyed the 3 books of hers that I read, and so I felt okay putting her on there. But at the same time, she's such an important writer in the fantasy community, the fantasy genre, that it's kind of like Tolkien, feels like she should be up there. So for Tolkien, obviously, Tolkien's, well, one, my favorite author, but he's also just one of the most influential and important fantasy writers of all time. So he's clearly going to be up there on just about everybody's Mount Rushmore, mine included, because he's my favorite author. So I already mentioned why Le Guin is up there. Brian Jacques, it has mostly to do with the amount of books that I've read. There's 23 books in the Redwall series, and I've read probably 19 or 20 of them. There's only, I think there's only 3 that I haven't read in the Redwall series, but what I absolutely loved every book in that series. There's some that are a little bit less, that I've liked a little bit less, but overall I've just really loved that whole series as a whole, and I reread it all the time. I reread random books in it, and I currently am actually rereading through the entire series, and hopefully reading the 3 books that I haven't read in the series. But I really love and appreciate the whole series. And then the last one I have on there is Sanderson. Sanderson, his newer books don't drive with me quite as much as his older books did. The first book that I read by him was Mistborn, or The Final Empire, that first book in Mistborn Era 1, and I loved it so much. Then I don't remember if I read books 2 and 3 in Mistborn Era 1 before I read Elantris, or if I read Elantris before I read the books 2 and 3. But either way, those 4 books were the first books of his that I read, and I absolutely loved all of them. I really enjoy, though it's not, I fully admit that it's not at the same level as Mistborn Era 1, but I really, really enjoy Era 2. I really enjoy Stormlight Archive Book 1 and Book 2. Book 3 and Book 4, not so much. I really enjoy them, don't get me wrong, but they're not quite as high on that list for me. And then, what's the other one? Warbreaker. I really enjoyed Warbreaker, but it's, again, I think a lot about Warbreaker, but it's not on that same level for me in many ways as Mistborn. And so I kind of have this, I really like a lot of what Sanderson does, and I think he's a brilliant storyteller, but he's gradually getting edged off by other people. And then Lewis, I really like the Chronicles of Narnia, and the more that I learn about Lewis and the more that I see as I'm reading those books, the more I really appreciate the Chronicles of Narnia. Question 2A. George Washington is the big dog on the mountain. He was the first US president and of course most legendary. Which of your selections falls into this slot? That would obviously be Tolkien. I don't really need to explain that. He's the granddaddy of fantasy, the big head of, what is this? The big dog on the mountain. He's very much that big dog on the mountain in terms of who is greatest fantasy authors. So he very much easily sits up there. 2B, from the legendary to you or longevity angle, who are 4 original channels you have watched since you began watching BookTube? These folks will also be considered tagged by you. So the 4 original channels that I have found that I just really appreciate, that would be ones like The Archive, Graham over at The Archive, Ramsey at Rajathon. Who else would have started right about that same, or who, well, Graham was one of the first people who commented on our channel, and so I've continued watching Graham's stuff, and he's been one of the people that I keep up with. Ramsey I've done quite a bit of stuff with, or talked to quite a bit. We did our Count of Monte Cristo read along with him. I'd say David Wiley, but he technically tagged me in this one, so I shouldn't say him. I could say Liam's Lyceum. I've talked to him quite a bit, and how about Owen Edwards? There's my 4 that I've just recently been talking to the most, I guess, and watching the most of. 3A, who is your Teddy Rosevelt? The one that carries a big stick, clubs you over the head with mind-blowing storytelling, ideas, suspense, or gives you a headache with difficult yet enjoyable writing. That would be Sanderson. His world building is just really beyond just about any other world builders today. The level of intricacy and the fact that his whole Cosmere is connected and how it's connected and how that all works together and the various different magic systems and the fact that each planet has several different magic systems that all tie into each other through the shards and how all that stuff works. I don't understand it nearly as well as I could or probably should. 3B, tag a booktuber who has an over-the-top personality or very strong opinions on books or bookish topics. There's lots of people that I could have gone with for this one, but the one that I thought about because of the very strong opinions, and every booktuber has very strong opinions. You read a book, you have opinions on that book, and sometimes they can change, but oftentimes you'll have very strong opinions on that book. Oftentimes it's, I really like this book, or I really didn't like this book, and those are both really strong opinions. But the one that I went with is David's book reviews. I've been watching David for quite a while, and I do appreciate his thoughts on a lot of different things. But he's also just a super nice guy, but he very much has strong opinions and is not afraid of making them known, and I appreciate that. 4A, Abraham Lincoln, an author who passed too early or you wished was still cranking out new incredible writing. I don't know that I have a great answer for this one, so I just went with Tolkien, and that's just because I would have liked to have seen his finished version of the Silmarillion, as well as whatever else he came up with. He died before he could publish the Silmarillion, but he didn't die young, and so I can't say that I'm mad at him or anything like that, and definitely not, and there's no reason to be. But I do think it would have been cool to be able to see his finished version of the Silmarillion and how that would have differed from Christopher's. Obviously, if we got his version, we would never have gotten Christopher's, so it wouldn't have mattered anyways. But that's maybe one of those kind of just a little bit of a cheat answers. It would have been cool to see, I guess. 4B, tag one booktuber from the north and one from the south, then let's make them battle. Oh, just kidding, let's just tag them. So as soon as I read this tag, I thought about the fact, who's from the north? Well, I'm in Alaska, there are a couple other Alaskan booktubers. I didn't think about that, and so I forgot who they were. I forgot to use them as this. So I went with a Canadian, and that would be Boiled Jellyfish. Very much a smaller channel. Great content though, he's hilarious. Absolutely go give him a sub. And then I went with Jessie the Sleepy Koala. So Jessie is from Australia. She's not in Australia anymore, she moved to the United States, but she is from Australia, and that's south. So now we've got Canada and Australia, and we're gonna make them battle it out. See what happens. Question 5. Thomas Jefferson is a problematic historical figure. This is what the tag says, or the prompt says, so I'm just reading it off. I don't know what your opinions are on the matter. I don't know what my opinions are on the matter because I actually need to do more research into the presidents. But Thomas Jefferson is a problematic historical figure. He's been riding high for decades as a revered founding father, but as a more mature society acknowledges his terrible record with slavery and abuse, the jig is up for him. Can you think of a book or an author that was or is revered that is not worthy of the status they enjoy? Okay, so for this question I went with C.S. Lewis, and I know I put him on my, or potentially put him on my Mount Rushmore, but let me kind of explain my thinking on this a little bit. So I really like Lewis, and I really like Narnia, but I don't know if I feel like he should be in that place, in the place that he is, where everybody seems to revere him as, oh, he's so good, his books are so great. I love his books, don't get me wrong, I think they're amazing, but I also don't know that I think that they're as good as everybody else says they are. So I don't know, I need to read more of his works. I need to read his science fiction trilogy, and I need to read some of his other just stories that he's written. So far, all I've read by him is the Chronicles of Narnia and then The Great Divorce. The Great Divorce was really strange, and I don't know what my thoughts are on that book. I don't know if I liked it or not, essentially. But I think he's a great author. I think he's a great writer and a great storyteller, but I'm not sure if he belongs in the place that everybody puts him as. So we'll see about that as I continue reading more of his works. 6a, Sacagawea or the Fifth Head. Historians and tribal leaders wanted the design to feature Sacagawea and other pioneers and Western heroes. Who is an author you love in a genre other than the one you went with for question 1? So I went with Western, that's the genre that I went with, and it specifically says other pioneers and Western heroes. I don't think it says it on this book, but Louis L'Amour is the author that I went with, and all over all his Westerns, this one is less of a Western, it's about Alaska and sailing, but his Westerns, he is, I believe the phrase is the foremost Western storyteller or something like that, and so I kind of just, the Western is what I kind of had to do, just kind of had to go with because of that. But anyways, I went with Louis L'Amour. I really like his books. I don't know that there's a Louis L'Amour book that I've read that I haven't liked. There's a couple that I liked less. Some of the early Sackett books I didn't love as much as some of his Western, other books that I've read of his. But I really liked Louis L'Amour. Reading Sitka right now, or at the time of filming this, I'll be done with it by the time the video goes up, I'm sure. But reading Sitka has just brought it back to my attention how good of a writer he is. He just very talented writer, able to elicit emotions and images in your mind without being super flowery in his writing. It's just very concise but precise at the same time, and you can envision what's going on, and I really appreciate that. He's, besides the fact that I love his stories, he's just technically a very good writer. 6b, name/tag a booktuber you follow who not only booktubes but also writes or is an author or vice versa, or artist. So a booktuber who writes or a writer who booktubes would be the vice versa. Also blurb one of their books. So I went with Bookish Chas for this one. Chas is, or Charles McGarry, is a booktuber, and he's also written a book called Talendor's Guest that I really enjoyed. I read it and I really enjoyed it, so that's the book that I'm going to plug, and that's Talendor's Guest. My plug for this book is Talendor's Guest is a book about a traveler who stumbles upon a dragon's lair and is forced to tell stories in order to survive. The book is written as a collection of short stories tied together by the fact they are all being told by the same person. Super fun, lots of talent displayed in the writing as well as the crafting of the worlds and magic systems. So there's just a whole lot going on in this book, a whole lot of different stories being told, very much in a Scheherazade-esque tale. And I really, first off, that instantly got my attention. I was like, ooh, this is gonna be fun. But then also the short stories within it were all so good. I don't think there was a single short story in there that I disliked. The magic systems are so unique, so cool to me, and there was a different magic system in each one. Some of them similar to things that we've seen in other stories, which is fine, perfectly fine, but the execution of them was so different, and I really liked that. So, Talendor's Guest by Charles McGarry, Bookish Chas is just phenomenal. Go check out the book and go check out Bookish Chas. So that is all the questions for the Your Mount Rushmore book tag. Thank you guys for watching an Erudite Adventure. We post videos every Monday and Thursday. We have our social medias linked in the description down below. Please like and comment and subscribe if you haven't already. We will see you guys again soon. Thanks for watching. Stay warm.